Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order for the March meeting of the Finance Committee. Doug, are there any public speakers?
Yes, sir. We have one public speaker, Murray Bowden.
Thank you.
My name is Murray Bowden. At the Long Island Railroad Committee meeting this morning, it was said that they could not order train engines because the FRA didn't approve of them. So we can't have adequate, this is about money. We can't have adequate rail service on Long Island Branch because the rules of the FRA don't permit European engines to be used here. And so they accept that, and I don't accept that. What I've been speaking about today is change, how we have to think differently. If those rail sets have been approved in Europe and have been used there for years, then what we need to do here is change the FRA rules to permit them to be used here. That's new kinds of thinking. There's a proven engine out there. They did it, by the way, with cars. Automobiles used to be necessary to be tested here. Automobiles are now permitted to accept the testing in Europe and applied here. They've changed the way of thinking. But the FTA has not changed their way of thinking yet. And it's somebody's responsibility to say to them, well, there's a train set that works very well in Europe. It's been working there for 10 years. Why can't we use it here and have better service on Long Island Railroad? Change the federal regulation and get an engine that works here and provides better service for your community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden.
Next, can we have the approval of the February 22nd minutes? We have a motion. Second. All in favor? Minutes are approved. Doug, could you take us through the work plan, please?
We have no changes to the work plan. Budget Watch is next. This month's Budget Watch focuses on February operating results and subsidy results through March. I'll start with revenue, specifically passenger revenue. For the month of February, passenger revenues were unfavorable by $13.3 million, or 2.8%, mostly due to lower subway ridership believed to have resulted from extremely low temperatures during the three-day President's Weekend. NYCT also experienced lower bus ridership, and on a combined basis, NYCT was $13 million, or 4.9% unfavorable. MTA bus revenue was 3% unfavorable for the month. Revenue was better than budget at both commuter railroads, however, with higher non-commutation ridership at Metro North and total higher ridership at the Long Island Railroad. Year-to-date results were lower than budget by $30 million, or 3.2% overall. Again, lower fare box revenue at NYCT and MTA bus attributable to the inclement weather, which was the Jonas storm in January and the cold temperatures that I mentioned already in February. Those are slightly offset by favorable results at the commuter railroads. As mentioned at the TBTA committee meeting just now, toll revenues were favorable for both the month and year-to-date, reflecting higher than anticipated traffic levels resulting from low gas prices. Year-to-date toll revenue was $15 million, or 5.9% favorable. Moving to expenses. Overall expenses were lower for the month of February and year-to-date. Preliminary expenses were $65 million, or 3.6% favorable to budget, and this was largely attributable to lower energy prices and the timing of costs for contractual services. Overtime costs were mostly on budget through February, with the exception of costs at NYCT for the January Jonas storm that exceeded their combined weather-related overtime allocation for both January and February. I'm going to speak a little bit more about overtime at the conclusion of this report. Moving to debt service, through February it was $33.2 million, or 14.2% favorable to budget. That was actually for the month of February. Year-to-date debt service was $409.7 million, which was $56.8 million, or 12.2% favorable to budget. In both the February and the year-to-date case, they reflect lower than budgeted variable rates, the timing of new issuances, and some minor savings from refundings. Moving to subsidies, total real estate transaction taxes for March were $17 million, or 16.5% favorable to budget, with the year-to-date variance favorable by $11.3 million, or 3.2%. March payroll mobility tax, the PMT, receipts were 6.2 or 5.7% favorable for the month, which decreased the level of the year-to-date unfavorable variance to $10.1 million, or 2.4%. I want to note that the March payment reflects an incomplete month of receipts due to the annual unavailability of the state accounting system while year-end updates are processed. This year, that process began 1 week earlier than expected, resulting in a 1-month lag of those receipts into April. So I guess what I'm saying is, had that 1 week lag not occurred, we think we'd be right on budget for PMT. We think that'll be made up in the April reporting numbers. MTA aid receipts, which are received on a quarterly basis, were $3 million, or 4.2% unfavorable. March PBT results were on target, leaving the year-to-date variance slightly unfavorable. However, it appears that the year-to-date variance was a result of the timing of collections that were captured in 2015. So if we look at 2015 and 2016 combined, we think we're right on target to our November plan projections. So overall, preliminary net results were positive for the month and year-to-date. Operating results were net positive, as higher toll revenue combined with lower expenses were only partially offset by the lower subway and bus revenue. As I mentioned, debt service costs were very favorable, and excluding the PMT timing variance, year-to-date subsidies were roughly on target, as the higher urban tax receipts within the real estate collections were mostly offset by the lower receipts of PBT and MTA aid. Do we have any questions on those results before I talk about overtime? Okay. So the issue of overtime growth at the MTA was recently highlighted in several newspaper articles that were referencing a report by the Empire Center. That report incorrectly asserted that overtime rose 11% between 2014 and 2015. The MTA immediately provided newspapers with the correct growth, which was actually 3.5%. The report did, however, correctly cite certain employees that earned high levels of overtime. In some cases, amounts earned were well in excess of their regular straight-time pay. The report also correctly cited work rules included within collective bargaining contracts as a chief cause of this dilemma. The MTA is committed to reducing overtime expenses and limiting overtime to only essential work, and only when the use of overtime is economically preferable to the alternative of hiring additional employees. That's what we call good overtime. To help achieve these results, the MTA is developing a web-focused reporting tool that will give MTA managers much more useful and detailed information down to the individual employee level on overtime usage and causality. The consolidation of all payroll systems at the BSC has made this possible. As this system rolls out, we will update the board with the results. Any questions? Next, we have Finance Watch.
Good afternoon. Finance Watch appears in Director's Desk on page 20 of your materials today. We have a couple transactions to report, the first being the Dedicated Tax Fund Refunding Bond Series 2016A. This was a refunding of $670 million of higher coupon outstanding bonds with lower interest bonds. The transaction resulted in very favorable results, present value savings of $103 million, or 15.37% of the refunded bonds. So we were very pleased with that transaction. It was led by Wells Fargo and a small syndicate of other firms mentioned here, and the rest of the statistics are there for your information. Next, we have a remarketing of $150 million dedicated tax fund variable rate bonds, Series 2002B1. This is just a standard credit substitution. The incumbent letter of credit provider is State Street Bank. They are exiting the transaction, and the transaction will be supported by a letter of credit from Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi. We'll price those bonds initially tomorrow and close them later this week. Next, we have $700 million of MTA Transportation Revenue Bond Anticipation Notes. This is 2016A. Again, this is just a a note issuance for our normal new money needs, and then as that note matures in the next 6 to 8 months, we'll take it out with long-term bonds. We'll also price those notes tomorrow through a competitive method of sale. And then lastly, on February 23rd, we executed a 2.9 million gallon ULSD hedge. Again, competitively bid, and the winning bidder here is noted as J.P. Morgan Ventures Energy Corporation. The price we paid there was $1.31 per gallon. So that concludes Finance Watch. I'm happy to take any questions. I did want to point out one other thing, and that's that we do have a request for proposals out on the street for underwriting services. This went out, I believe it was about a week ago. We're expecting responses in mid to late April, and as we go through that process, we'll hope to come to the board with our conclusions after we've gone through scoring of the written proposals as well as oral interviews, and we'll keep you apprised of that.
Jonathan?
Thank you. Today. I have two questions, thank you. First is, when do you anticipate the financial advisor RFP to be distributed?
Sure, that will be later in the year. Again, we're having our FA work with us on our underwriter selection, and as we come to the conclusion of that process, we'll then immediately go out with the RFP for financial
Do
advisor.
you come to us for that, or is that just something you do?
To issue the RFP itself, no. We come to you with our recommendations after the committee.
But you
is-
apprise us like you just did when it's out?
Yeah, I'll let you know when it's out on the street.
Thank you. The second question is, the interest rates in the first quarter are markedly lower than the experts predicted as recently as late last year.
Right.
Have you been able to, that refunding number you just shared was extraordinary. Great work, saving
Thank you.
over 15%. It's just great for our capital program and great work. Have you been able to take advantage of that to the extent you had?
We absolutely have.
So
Just to recall, we started really taking advantage of these market conditions back in December with the transportation revenue refunding on an advance basis, and then we did some Triborough bonds on a refunding basis when we did their new money deal, and now we've done DTF. So we've taken some of those savings off the table of every credit over the past quarter, I guess I'd say, and we're going to continue to be opportunistic and get into the market to take advantage of refundings when we can.
Just a quick follow-up. So when you're analyzing whether you do the 700 million notes as notes or bonds, are
Right.
you're trying to anticipate where rates will be when you issue the bonds?
I would say no, we're not. We certainly don't have a market view or an expectation of being able to lock into a particular market. The band program, remember, the whole point of issuing the notes in advance, it gives us much more clarity in terms of what we're financing, the average life of the asset, the type of asset, and so forth. And so our view is we're such a frequent issuer, that we're going to be in good markets, we're going to be in bad markets, but over time, the portfolio shows the results. And I think if you look in your director's desk, and we report this every month, our all-in weighted average interest cost of the portfolio now is at 3.69%.
Yeah.
So we're continuing to look for those opportunities to continue to bring that cost down, because we know there'll be higher interest rate markets in the future, and it's going to creep that number up. And to the extent that we can lock things in now, we are.
Also, when you do bonds, are you still trying to get the longest term possible for the
Yes.
facility? Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to MTA HQ and all agency items. There's one action item, which is the all-agency annual procurement report. This action item is to authorize the filing with the State of New York, the annual MTA all-agency procurement report for the period January 1, 2015 through December 31st, 2015, as required under Section 2879 of the State Public Authorities Law. The report is also found on the Director's Desk Document Center and also at the MTA website, mta.info. So we need a motion, Tom?
Second. All in favor?
We have two MTA headquarter report and information items. First being the MTA Prompt Payment Annual Report for 2015. This report reviews MTA-wide success in meeting mandated prompt payment deadlines, including the interest penalties incurred as a result of late payment. In 2015, the MTA, on an agency-wide basis, paid a total of $62,988 of interest on a total invoice value paid of $10,412 million. This was a 21% decrease in the amount of prompt payment interest compared to the 2014 amount paid, which was so that was a significant improvement. Again, that's just for information. Any questions? Second information item is the contract change order report for the fourth quarter of 2015, which reports on change orders with values between $250,000 and $750,000. Contracts with larger values are captured within monthly procurement packages. Again, that was just for information. With no questions, we're going to move to individual procurements, and Angel Barbosa is here to take us through that.
Thank you, Doug. Good afternoon. For headquarters, there are 4 competitive procurements for personal service miscellaneous contracts for a grand total of $32.7 million. I'd like to highlight and point out one staff summary in particular. We are recommending approval for enterprise asset management software maintenance. This software is the primary tool to handle all maintenance, strategic planning, and reliability initiatives in an integrated and uniform manner. The specifics for this RFP, we publicly advertised the RFP. 84 firms received the RFP. 6 proposals were received. 5 firms were brought in for oral presentations. 5 vendors advanced to round 1. Software demos were run for each of those vendors. There were a total of 2,200 requirements built out for this RFP. 1 vendor advanced to round 2, where we had further software demos to set up the system and provide further due diligence. This is the main software that we'll use for our EAM Enterprise Asset Management Program going forward.
We need a motion. The second, please. Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
Next on the agenda, we have procurements for Metro North. There are 2 competitive procurements for a grand total of $6.2 million.
Do we have a motion? Any comments or second? Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
Next are procurements for Long Island Railroad. There are 3 procurements for Long Island Railroad for a grand total of $419,000. One is a non-competitive sole source procurement for a total of $419,000. There are also 2 requests for use of the RFP process.
Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
For New York City Transit MTA bus operations, there are 6 procurements for a grand total of $79.9 million. 2 are non-competitive procurements for a total of $16 million. 2 are competitive procurements for a total of $63.8 million. And 2 are requests for the use of the RFP process.
Motion. Second. Any comments or questions? Mr. Murdler. Could you put your microphone on, sir? Thank you.
Please record me as abstaining on item number 3.
So noted. All in favor? Aye.
Next, we have bridges and tunnels. There is 1 competitive procurement for RFP jointly with New York City Transit for multi-agency public works contracts on an as-needed basis for a grand total of $145 million.
Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
There are no items for FTAC. This includes the procurements.
Thanks, Angel. You'll note on page 72 is the MTA Consolidated Financial and Operational Report section. Next would be Jeff Rosen with the real estate portion of the meeting.
Thanks, Doug. We have 6 action items this month, including approval of our all-agency real property and personal property disposition guidelines. You may recall that's a statutory requirement that we approve those guidelines each spring. This year, we are proposing no substantive changes in those guidelines. unless there are any questions about that, I'd ask for approval.
Mr. Merdler?
Let me repeat a comment I made for you to think about, please, concerning item number B, the license agreement for the distribution of the newspapers at the stations. Seems to me that I recall way back when being told that newspapers are a major cause of debris that in turn causes fire, and I'm wondering whether we are in any way adding to the likelihood of that.
On the contrary, it's my understanding that these racks have been designed to mitigate that problem. One of the common practices along with the hawking previously has been that bundles were left unattended, and there was no sort of contractual undertaking to remove them. And these racks are in part designed to control the newspapers and then to organize their removal by the newspapers.
As I recall it, my recollection could be wrong. The problem was people who take the newspapers walk down to the subway station, then discard them. And the bundles won't help that, nor will this device. I just ask you to think about it. I'm all for doing this, I really am. But I think the people who do it ought to undertake a part of the cost of cleaning up behind themselves. And I'd urge you to think about putting that in any agreement.
All right. Well, what I can say is, what was said at Transit today, which is that this is an arrangement that is terminable at will. And it's the expectation and of Transit, based on the way the pilot went, that this will in fact substantially reduce litter. If that turns out not to be the case, of course we can revisit that. Any other? Yeah, so of the other items, I would just highlight the sale of excess zoning floor area at West Side Yards. This is an opportunity that has arisen by virtue of the culture shed not using its entire 200,000 square foot allowance under the zoning, so that as contemplated by the zoning and our restrictive declaration, we had an opportunity to sell these 100,000 feet. They do need to stay on site, and as a practical matter, that meant that we had a sole source discussion with Related, but as stated in the staff summary, we're happy with the pricing. It's in excess of the dollar per square foot that Hudson Yards Development Corporation has been getting in the rest of the district. So this is depending on whether they take the full 70,000, between 15 and 18 million dollars of money that has not previously been in our in our anticipated proceeds from the yard. So we're very pleased about that.
Mr. Bellin?
I do have a couple questions. I didn't fully follow that explanation, and I read the material. Can you review the process for determining the price, the sale price?
Right. Well, the first thing to note is that we obtained an independent appraisal as required by the Public Authorities Law and as is indeed our standard practice. When it comes to the pricing of development rights, there is some art to it because there is a more limited market for transferable development rights than there is for, what I'll call terra firma. So whereas there are lots and lots of examples of what land is trading, undeveloped land is trading for as a standalone development site, in the case of TDRs, there is traditionally in the marketplace a discount that reflects the fact that there's a limited number of buyers. That discount has ranged from as low as 25% to as high as 80-something%. But the typical discount that HYDC has been using based on advice from their appraisers has been 65%, and we did better than that.
God, what a day. Okay. But another way to look at it is you have a captive buyer who, if they want this, and if they can reasonably, it's an excellent company, a highly regarded company, developer. But if they want this and can turn it into something that presumably would be in their interest in the private economy, we have a captive audience, and we might be able to extract more than what you're
And
saying,
they have a
not
captive, they have a
less.
captive seller, we have a captive buyer. That's why we did the arm wrestling that's alluded to in the staff summary, and this is the number we've come up with, which we think is favorable pricing.
Which is using a discount, right? You went through that 25
Not
to
a discount from
65?
fair market value for this item, a discount from terra firma pricing. This is more money than HYDC has been getting based on appraisals for this type of property interest.
I know, but that, again, that's a different context. We're
No, it's
talking
actually the
about,
same context.
I don't think so at all, because we have this, they don't. They want it, they should pay for it. The question to me is, should they pay the value or a premium over the value, not a discount over the value? And I don't follow the argument that says they should pay a discount. What is the discount that you said? It's 25%?
Yes.
So we're giving them a 25% discount off of the appraised value. Why?
From the appraised value of terra firma, that's not the way transferable development rights are priced in the marketplace. They're typically priced with a larger discount.
This is not a typical development of someone running out doing a spec building or something. This is captive audience. What are they going to do? How much? Maybe you could explain what they can do with these TDRs.
They will be building a slightly larger building in what we call Tower E, which is in the northwest corner of the Eastern Rail Yards.
What's slightly? Come on. How much bigger?
It's 60,000 square feet.
They have in perpetuity 60,000 square feet more. And for that, we are getting what?
Again, assuming it's 60,000, it would be $15,750,000.
Is there a need to conclude this today?
Yes.
What
They
is
have-
that?
We have they have a scheduled closing with their financing, so they need to know how big the building is going to be. And we have a 60-day, as mentioned in the staff summary, we have a 60-day process to start with approval from Albany because it's a sole source disposition.
If I'm the only one with questions, I defer to others. I just didn't think I was a little surprised to see we're discussing discounts. And given our situation, I'd like to see premium.
Any further comments or questions? Could I have a motion, please? On that item, you want to be recused? So noted.
Can I ask about the J Street one?
Sure.
You didn't mention that. Could you explain what we're paying, when, and why?
Again, when we did the original deal with the city and NYU, we hoped to get NYU to agree to renovate the entrances along with the rest of their work. At the time, they were unwilling to entertain that possibility. They wanted to stick to their own knitting. As it is, Transit has negotiated an arrangement whereby NYU will oversee this work at cost. That is to say, without overhead or profit for NYU. The construction manager fee and overhead, or general conditions, I should say, is believed by Transit to be favorable, and the rest of it will be bid out. The trades will be bid out, open book, sealed bids, et cetera. It's the judgment of Transit that this will be a substantial cost savings versus the alternative of waiting until NYU's work is done and then taking this on as an independent project in the normal course.
Yeah, I'm just a little confused. Is NYU subsidizing our work at all,
No.
or not?
No.
Do you think they should be? Will they be major beneficiaries of this work or not?
I don't think they're major beneficiaries. There will be a more efficient subway entrance at this location.
But having tenants and people using who use facilities atop or adjacent to our improvements is typically something we're trying to capture some revenue from the non-government sector, right?
This is the city's property.
It's part of the master lease. It's a city property.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but we're going to be undertaking work at a substantial cost, and I just wanted to point out that is occurring, and no one else seems to care, so, okay.
Well, no, I mean, the original deal was, I think, widely understood to be very favorable to us. NYU paid us $50 million to fund our telecom relocation project there to allow us to vacate the property. And you may not know the history of 370J. It was something of a white elephant, something of an albatross for this agency. And it was disposed of, on terms that worked well for us and the city.
Any further questions, John?
No, sir.
Okay.
About all of these procurements?
Yes, I think they're all being active.
Can I ask a question
Sure,
about
that's fine. Yeah.
Myrtle Viaduct?
Sure.
So in the acquisition of the houses that immediately border the elevated structure, is there a limit placed on if the owners ask for a certain amount versus, selling their property versus relocating them? Have you placed a limit on the amount that we will offer them?
Well, the first order of business is to get our consultant in there to interview all of the owners and tenants and to understand what their needs are, what their sort of view of the work is, and then we will try to tailor our package to what works best for all concerned. The condemnation, to the extent we would use it, would be to acquire temporary interests. It's our hope that as many of the owners and tenants as possible can be induced to enter into voluntary arrangements, and for that purpose, we would entertain requests for buyouts, but obviously not without limit.
This and the L-Train 2 work are part of the capital program we're waiting for approval on, correct? Or is this one on the existing capital plan?
I don't know the answer to that.
I believe the Sandy work for Canarsie is funded under the 15 through 19, the 10 through 14 program. I'm not sure on Myrtle Avenue, but I believe it is as well, but we can get you an answer.
Thank you.
But this is the start of a process. This is approval to seek RFP to be able to do that. David, did you want to answer? David Henley?
Canarsie is Sandy-related funding, as well as what the feds call core capacity funding. It's a combination of both of those. For the Myrtle work, it'll be our core program funded through 15 to 19 program.
Any further? Thank you, David. Any further? Mr. Murdler?
At the last meeting, as I recall it, board meeting, we postponed for 1 month the decision on 347. Do we have anything on that?
Mr. Ferran?
We continue to have discussions with the city as to what the appropriate value should be shared between MTA and between the city. We have not concluded those negotiations, so it's not appropriate to bring it back to the board to vote on it until we continue to discuss with the city and answer the questions that they have. So,
The reason I ask is that the resolution putting it over was for 30 days. Query, do you have to have another resolution? And do we have a deadline date?
again, I'm waiting for a phone call from the city, and we'll have a better answer at that time, and we can brief the board on Wednesday.
I've had conversations with the deputy mayor. His concern is to get this issue resolved as well, and he's committed to do that in an expeditious way. It was their intention to have it done before this particular board cycle, but it wasn't possible. So their attention is on it with the same level and desire we have in terms of get it resolved. Any further comments or questions, or can we have a vote? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None?
I'm going to abstain to the two. I don't think I have complete information. Don't feel capable of voting either way on the NYU one and on the Hudson Yards one.
So noted. I believe that concludes the agenda items for the meeting. We need a motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you.